Jenny.
Hey, Mish. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Happy Wine
Hi.
Wednesday.
Happy Wine Wednesday to everybody. I hope your week is going great so far.
Absolutely. Hopefully you guys aren't having as crappy of weather as we are in Texas, but I hope you're somewhere, moderate with some mountains and you have a view while you sip your wine.
That sounds very nice.
Awesome. Well, we're very excited to be with you guys today. Our topic today is how to plan a bucket list trip, which obviously, if you guys have been following Michelle and I's journey for a while, you know that both of us are obsessed with travel. And both of us are planners. So we're here for you guys to essentially, gain from those fruits so that you guys know how to make an amazing experience. And we're super excited to share with you guys. But before we get into that, let's chat about our wine for the day. We are drinking a Campuget Rosé. It's from the Rhone. So a lot of rosés are from the Rhone. Similar to what we've talked about in the past, one of the things about drinking rosé is in most cases, you want to drink it pretty young. So this vintage is really young. You want to drink it in the same year or maybe a year later for most rosés. This is 70% Syrah and 30% Grenache Noir, because Grenache can be a white grape as well. It's made by draining from the vat, and the color is obtained. Obviously, it's very pale pink. So the color is obtained by a very, very short maceration, which is contact with the grape's skins. It's only for about 4 to 12 hours just to give it that really pretty pink color. The fermentation takes place in stainless steel tanks, which give it a lot of light, bright acidity. And this one is a really aromatic wine. It's perfect for summer. It's really fruity, lots of like raspberries, strawberries, red fruits. And because it's done in the stainless steel vats, it's super bright and light and high acid. So definitely drink it young, have it outside by the pool, or, with barbecue would be really good for this wine.
Definitely. Well, thanks, Jenny, for another great wine pick of the week. Now let's get into our rose and thorns. You want to go ahead and share yours?
Yes. So my rose, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about my vacation from last week. My family and I rented out this really beautiful lake house in Canyon Lake, which is just about an hour outside of Austin. The house was like to the nines, like literally. Obviously, the house had been lived in before they converted it to an Airbnb. So they had anything that you would ever want from a kitchen utensil perspective. We were able to cook full meals. There was a grill, fire pit, hot tub, pool, cornhole, boat dock, the whole nine. And it was really awesome to get to spend that time with my family. I really, full transparency, wanted to relax more than we got to. It's always a sign of a good vacation when you get back and you're like, man, I wish I had one more day.
Yeah, it looked really fun. It was beautiful.
It was so fun. In the future, I'm definitely going to go somewhere a bit cooler because although we spent most of the trip in the water, it was still it's just it's so oppressive out here. Like it was I think we're on day 30 of 100-degree plus weather. So
yeah, I was looking actually at the weather in Austin, I think last week, and every day was over 100.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
I know we talking about the weather's boring, a lot, and we've been talking about it a lot probably, but it's literally hotter than it's been in 10 years. So I'm dying. And my thorn is, I think I've shared with you guys before that my husband and I bought a boat a couple of years ago. And so I didn't know anything about driving a boat, and neither did he before we bought it. And so we've really been taking a crash course in nautical everything. And there's a lot of considerations that you have to remember when you're driving the boat. And what we've done is there are certain things that I'm responsible for, and there are certain things that he's responsible for. We kind of tag team it. And I can't back up a truck with the trailer on it. I just can't do it. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to learn how to drive the boat, and I'm going to learn how to park the boat on the trailer, and I'm going to learn how to do all these things because I am not backing the trailer up into the water. And I mean, I've done it 1,000 times at this point. I have a routine down. I understand all the rules, the ins and outs, whatever. Well, we were at a new boat dock and it was kind of stressful because there was like 8 million boats around and there was like tight corners and it was nuts over the weekend. So I was a little bit nervous about putting the boat on the trailer. And we did it twice. The first day was fine. Everything went great. And the second day, there was like a bunch of like party boats around. And I was like, gosh, how am I going to navigate this? And then I did like everything perfect. Everything was Gucci. And there's like a bunch of things that you need to remember. You have to trim up. You have to do X, da, 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 da. Okay. The most important thing when you're putting the boat on the trailer is turning the boat off. And Mitchell pulled me out of the water all the way up the boat ramp and out of the parking lot, and the engine was still on. Really,
oh my gosh.
You're not supposed to start the engine outside of the water. So I just had like this like shameful, like, oh my God, I broke the boat, like forever.
So what happened?
I don't know. We haven't tested it since. So I don't know. It's just like, y'all pray for me that it was like really short and nothing bad happened. But I just felt so guilty because it's like my responsibility and I messed it up. So that was my thorn.
Oh, no. At least you realized it, though.
That's true. We didn't go all the way home with the boat on.
Okay, so that's good. So find a little positive in it.
I know. My God. What about you?
So my rose of the week, or weekend, I should say, is that me and some of my friends and boyfriend went to the Google Dolls and OAR concert, and it was so fun. So I feel like this summer, actually, I feel like summers, like in general, are just like a series of different concerts. So I think this is like my second or third one of the summer so far, and it was so nice. So it was actually up in Bethel Woods, New York, if any of you are familiar. So it was up in the mountains and just really like beautiful landscape. It was like a cool night. It was so fun. And even though I feel like Google Dolls is like one of those bands where like even if you don't like love them, I feel like you've heard like some of their songs like on the radio. So it was really fun. So we had a great night, just singing along, dancing, and then it's my thorn for the week. So actually I gave Jenny a good laugh before this, but I've been trying to get professional headshots done for the longest time. And in-person ones, I had them scheduled for a few weeks ago and it didn't work out. So a few of my colleagues were trying out the AI generated headshots. So I was like, you know what, let me do this because I don't know when I am going to get the opportunity to get them in person. And my headshot is so old. It's like 5-6 years ago and it needs to be updated. So I go on this website, I do everything. They generate it back and it doesn't look at me like me at all. So they have me like with blonde hair and like just my face doesn't look like me. And then they just put me in the clothes. So the clothes that I'm in, like it's like a full-on suit and tie, and then also like a polo shirt. And I was just like, I can't use these.
You guys, literally, it was everything that she was wearing clothing-wise was like from the 90s. And then that her face looks like she went to like an injector and they went insane with Botox and like her eyebrows are all like faded. I was literally rolling on the ground. It was the best thing I've seen all week.
I wish I could share them with you. Just that's how bad they were.
I think y'all should ask for it. It's definitely like gave me the best laugh I've had all week.
Maybe next week we could show some clips of it.
I think that would be the best use of time ever.
Yes. So even though it has been a thorn trying to get these done, it did give us a good laugh.
My God. All right, guys, before we got into our segment where we talk about some of the tips that we have for planning a bucket list vacation, Michelle, we would be remiss if you weren't sharing a quote with us.
Yes, it's time for the quote of the week. And this week I try to stick to our topic. So it's a little traveling quote here also is we travel, some of us forever, to seek other places, other lives, other souls. And that was by Anais Nin. And this just really like spoke to me about travel because I'm one of those people that love to travel to experience the culture. And I really feel like that's given me so much experience and has made me more adept within these different cultures and languages. And, another thing I like to say is everybody has a story. I feel like when you go out traveling to different places, you could really see the stories of these other people there. So it just really spoke to me, and I loved it. I thought it was a great leeway into our topic today.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Okay, so without further ado, some of these are going to be pretty intuitive, but I promise you, when you get caught up in the frenzy of actually planning, some of these things actually slip your mind. And if you're anything like me, prior to me being very cognizant of this and making concerted efforts to plan out a trip, I was the girl that was like, oh yeah, that sounds great, I'll come, to anybody who would ask. And I've started to become a lot more intentional about my trips. So first and foremost, you got to choose the destination, right? And when you're choosing the destination, you have to ask yourself a slew of questions about what's important to you on that specific trip. So first and foremost, are you going solo or are you bringing somebody with you? This is something that you want to delineate. When you're going solo, obviously you can do all of your non-negotiables, but when you're going with somebody else, you want to make sure that you guys talk beforehand to delineate what your non-negotiables are and what the other person's non-negotiables are, so that you guys can compromise. So what does that process look like for selecting a destination? For me, I always consider, like, what am I interested in? What's my budget at the current moment? How much time do I have available? That's a huge one. Is this going to be a quick jaunt, or am I going to actually spend months and months putting together an itinerary, because this is like a bucket list forever trip? Are there travel restrictions where you're going? And I don't just mean COVID, right? Like, there's other things that you need to consider, political climates, economic climates. There are a lot of things that you should definitely do your due diligence. For example, my husband and I are going to London, and we wanted to do a day trip to Paris, and we still might. But last we were checking, there was a lot of tension going on. There was rioting, and it just wasn't a good time to go. So these are the types of things that you want to make sure that you're checking beforehand. And, you know, for me personally, and this is just me, there are other people who maybe are a little bit more touristy and don't want to have more of the local vibe. They want to have the tourist vibe. But I try to avoid high traffic areas in terms of tourism, unless it's Christmas, which that's a caveat that we'll get to at a later date. But everybody and their mom in Europe has August off. So right. I'm not going to go to Europe in August, barring something crazy, right? I'm going to try to go to places not necessarily in off season, but maybe at a lower point, because not only are you going to be less crowded, you're going to have more opportunity to do the things that you want, but it's also going to be less expensive. So those are things to think about. Back to my Christmas point. I'm like a 5-year-old child when it comes to Christmas. Like, I am constantly chasing that Christmas high. Like, I'm literally coming to see Michelle for Christmas this year because she lives in New York City, and hello, Rockefeller Center, it's happening. So I have to plan in advance. Like, I do a ton of research on who's going to have the best Christmas markets, what's going to have the best Christmas spirit, where am I going to go feel like I'm immersed in a Hallmark film? Like, these are all the things that I want to experience. And it requires a ton of advanced planning, because lo and behold, I'm not the only person who feels this way. So you definitely have to be cognizant of that. And then I always try, I live in Austin, which is hellaciously hot in the summer. So I always try every single year to create at least one trip where I'm escaping the heat. Mostly because of ease and lack of time, we end up going to Colorado because it's beautiful there in the summer. But it's like a nice little reprieve, and it's a really good way for you to, like, if you're a remote worker, it's a really good way for you to capitalize on that. I'll do like a bookend where I'll take a couple of days off, but I'll get some work done. So that's something that I've always done, and I will continue to do as long as I live in Austin anyhow.
Mine is actually kind of the opposite. So I kind of trip to escape the cold. So normally, you know, when it starts getting into like the dead of winter, so end of December, January, we're either going to Florida. Well, my boyfriend likes to say we've become snowbirds, but not yet. I don't think I'll ever become a snowbird, because I love New York too much. But either Florida or to like the Caribbean or Mexico, just trying to get somewhere warm. I'll actually share, though, when we talk about some of our other like personal stories about Mexico during that time. it's crazy there. Kind of like you were saying, you know, try to see like when it's going to be like high tourist season. So I guess I'll just jump into it now. But we actually went to Tulum. So it was New Year's a few years ago. And this was like 2 years after COVID. And we didn't realize how many people go to Tulum and spend New Year's there. And like the main like strip, if you've ever been to Tulum, how they have like where all the like beach clubs are, all the fun activities, it was like mobbed. Like you couldn't even get through like to the beach clubs and everything like that. And everybody like hikes up the prices. So all the like cabs, food, everything was just like twice more expensive going there during that time. So we definitely learned our lesson on that one.
I did not know that. So good to know.
Yeah.
I used to go to Cancun like in early December to we don't really get that cold of weather here, but it's affordable there. It is low season. New Year's, maybe not so much because it's a party, but early December, you can get great deals. So again, to Michelle's point, just make sure you're doing your research. And then kind of in that same vein, when it comes to research, we live in a much different world now than we did even a year or two ago with regard to the resources that are available to you to research. When I first started planning bucket list trips for myself, I would use like TripAdvisor and Viator and all of those websites. And quite honestly, those are businesses just like anything else. And a lot of times they're using an algorithm and a lot of times they're revenue sharing. So you're not always going to get the best of the best leveraging those websites. And in a lot of cases, you're going to get mainly touristy things. We live in the age of YouTube. We live in the age of AI. Leverage those resources. I'm going to London. My husband and I found, for lack of better terminology, she's an influencer, but she moved to London 10 years ago, and her full-time job is to explore the city and establish content for people that she has experienced firsthand, and she takes you along on her journey with a video crew. So
I love that.
And she's an amazing resource. And she gives you practical tips. She gives you tourism tips. So just finding that person, if the longer you have to do this, the more you can kind of deep dive into their content to discern whether or not this is a person that you should trust. And there's you can even use AI to generate a trip itinerary for you. So there's so many options in terms of digging a little bit deeper. Instagram is a great resource because you're usually going to get photos that can actually show you the vibe of places.
Yeah. Another resource I actually like to use is Pinterest, if you ever use it. So what I'll do is a few days before I'll go, or if I'm planning a trip, I'll put in that area, and it generates so many other people's itineraries, like down to like what to wear there. So that has been really helpful as well.
I love that. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the next segment, which is making sure that you're setting goals and priorities for the trip, right? So this is something that you should do from jump. You need to make sure that you're establishing what's important to you or your travel companion. And for me, I call these non-negotiables. Whenever we started doing this with my larger family, and there's 8 of us. So when we're going somewhere, each person got 2 non-negotiables, because if you give them any more, we were never going to get everything done. So what that does is it really forces you to be intentional about what you want to accomplish on that trip and what you want to see, especially if you're going somewhere that has a ton of sites. The more research you do, if you can narrow it down. Now, if you have more time, that's amazing. You can have way more non-negotiables. But I would journal and write down what those non-negotiables are before you leave, so that you can make arrangements. And then there's different types of experiences, and depending on where you're going, right? Are you looking for adventure? Are you looking for culture? Are you looking for relaxation? Are you looking for immersion? I plan for all of those things. And I know that doesn't sound sexy to a lot of people because of spontaneity, but I'm a huge believer that if you actually want to be spontaneous and enjoy your time being spontaneous, you need to plan that. You need to plan a time where you're going to be spontaneous. We have a very short amount of time in a lot of these destinations, and we pay a lot of money for them. So you may as well maximize as much as you can.
Definitely. So a quick question for you, actually, before we move on, but what has been your most favorite city to travel to during Christmas so far?
Oh my gosh. I've been really bad But there's this cute little city outside of Austin called Johnson City, and it's right next to wine country. And I go there most years for Christmas. There's also another one in spring in Houston that I would go to. The year that we moved back to Austin, we actually made plans and arrangements and booked everything to go to Leavenworth, Washington, which is famous for being like Little Bavaria. And they do it super, super big. And we planned our whole itinerary. We were super excited about it. It was expensive because so many people want to go there at that time. But we actually bought a house right before we were going to go, and our closing date was during the trip, so we canceled it.
Oh, no.
I know, it sucked. We bought travel insurance, which is another tip.
Yes.
But our biggest Christmas experience is going to be this year. We're going to London. We'll share with you guys. We're going to be gone for like 15 days, 20 days almost. And we're leaving December, and I've already put together a comprehensive itinerary. So we've been working on it to make sure that we can get all of our bucket list items. One of the things that the woman that I was telling you about on YouTube made sure to let everybody know is she literally said, there is no such thing as spontaneity about Christmas in London during December. Like, you have to plan. So I will report back for you guys.
Yes, you have to. Give us a little recap of the trip. I'm so excited for you.
Absolutely.
So now we're going to get into my favorite topic that we've probably talked about now for maybe 2 to 3 weeks. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because we've shared these tips already, but budgeting and financial planning. So first and foremost, you want to make sure that you're able to afford the trip and you set aside enough money. You don't want to live outside of your means and plan this huge trip, luxurious trip, if it's going to make you broke, basically. So what you want to do is some strategies that we've shared before, but if you know your goal of how much you need during that vacation, is that you just simply break it down to the number of months that you have leading up to that trip, and just make sure that you're setting aside that amount of money. So, and make sure it's super important to make sure that you have every detail covered. So whether that be airfare, also account for, hotel, eating out, transportation, little gifts you want to do. If you want to take trips during the day, you have to set aside money for that. And there's, different ways to do it. So whether that be within your monthly budget or setting up separate bank accounts that we talked about, especially in a high yield savings account. So within some of these accounts, you could actually make multiple accounts for different topics. So like one, you could have your emergency savings. One would just be strictly your traveling budget. So, when you're going on vacation, you don't have to spend any of your, say like regular money. You're just strictly taking from your travel budget. And let me tell you, it helps a lot. There's been so many times where I went on the trip, just used from my travel spending account, and I felt so much better just coming back and knowing that I didn't have to, touch into my regular normal money.
Absolutely. And like to Michelle's point, like before I started my own company, I was in consulting. So I would get windfalls with money. I didn't have a regular pay schedule. So anytime I would get a windfall, I would set a portion of that aside and designate it for travel. And I choose to prioritize travel over many other things. So I know a lot of people would buy themselves a nice gift with it, and I would just choose to set it aside for travel. So to each their own, just make sure that you're accounting for all of these expenditures. And if you're not in that position, you can cut expenses that are not bringing you joy, right? So there's a lot of strategies that you can leverage or avail yourself to.
There are, and we did go over some of those trips prior about cutting your expenses. So maybe, I know, like, I hate saying this about, not going out to buy coffee every day, but you can maybe cut back on eating out, spending some money on luxurious items you could cut back on. And then also finding travel deals. So if you're booking it, way further in advance, you could find better travel deals than, say, if you're booking like right before. So you could be on the lookout for those. I mean, I've planned a lot of trips where I've been very stingy and been able to travel to like beautiful destinations for, next to nothing.
Absolutely. And then Michelle, you may have touched on this already, but you have separate bank accounts that you put off the top for your travel, don't you?
Yes. Yep. So in my high yield savings account, what I have is I have my regular emergency savings fund. So that's my 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. And then I have a separate account just strictly for travel. So every month, I'll set aside, like sometimes if I don't have a trip plan, I'll just set aside, say like $25. But if I know that a trip's coming up and I have to save, I'll like ramp that up. Or also, if you're living on a strict budget, but that that's one of your like non-negotiables is travel, you can work it into that budget. So, okay, every month I'm saving $100 to put into my travel account. And I know there's actually some apps too that help you do that, where you could just set it up automatically, where it'll transfer from your checking or savings account into a separate account. And it's kind of like a set it and forget it thing.
Yeah, we can link those later in the notes. But another thing that I've used, it's not necessarily for travel, but I have the Acorns app that kind of just like rounds up your expenses and puts it into a pool, and they invest it into probably like index funds. I honestly haven't dug into it very deeply, but I know that it is set it and forget it. And there have been times when I have forgotten that I've been rounding up my dollars, and there's been like $700 in there. So I pulled that before my last trip to Miami. And it almost feels like it's found money, right? Because it's just, you could use that for whatever it is that you want to at that point.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. And then our next tip, well, not really tip, but next portion we want to go over is creating a travel itinerary. I know Jenny touched on this a little bit, so we'll just go over it kind of briefly, but you just want to make sure that you do have that detailed travel itinerary if you know of your non-negotiables, so to speak. So if you know you want to do things, you should have a day-to-day travel itinerary planned for you. And you can set up days. What I like to do sometimes is have a no activities day. So I know, say like in the middle of the trip, we'll plan a day where we have nothing planned. So if we need to relax or there's like a pool around us, we'll just go and like hang out at the pool. And makes it a little bit easier, not thinking like, oh, we have so much to do or get done, during our time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we do the same. And then one thing to keep in mind that like sometimes I'll get really aspirational when I go on a trip, and I'm like, as soon as we land, we're going to go out to eat and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. So I always try like the first day, like the travel day, I build a lot of buffer in and I make sure that I'm like, usually we don't even plan like a dinner out that night. We're just going to grab street food. We're going to do takeout. We're going to keep it really chill, really low key. And then cultivating maybe tops 3 experiences in a day. That's pushing it, right? So I try really hard to make sure that I have enough time there so that I don't even I don't feel like I'm just like running around and getting hit over the head with the vacation, right? Yeah. So there's so many opportunities for you to be more concerted about that. And you will thank yourself later, even if you are a spontaneous person. My husband is a spontaneous person. It used to drive him nuts. He'd be like, man, I just want to like chill on vacation. Yeah. Like, we're on vacation. Why aren't you chilling? And I'm like, if I'm ever not chilling on vacation, it's because I didn't plan to make it to where I could actually like relax, because then I'm stressing about what we could be doing.
Yeah. Wait, okay. So that's me. So we're like the same. And then my boyfriend is just like, so Chris is just like that. So he's like, we need to like just chill. I don't want to be doing all of these activities. And like waking him up like super early, like, come on, we have to go. Like, I have like a whole list of what we have to do. He gets super stressed. So
what, shocker, so we're the same.
Exactly. So we had to send them on a trip, and then we could go on one.
Oh my God, here for it. And I mean, that kind of goes into our next tip, which is navigating logistics. So you need to make sure, obviously, the big sweeping items are taken care of. So flight, accommodations, transportations, visa, all of those types of items, you need to have a plan for those. And I would do some research on your destination, when the best flight deals are. One thing I want to debunk for you guys, I know a lot of people tell you to like book flights on Tuesdays because they're better fares. And I want to debunk that for you guys, because that's actually not true. That was based off of old technology where we didn't have AI. We didn't have all this integrative technology that was able to give the airlines supply and demand data and statistics more quickly. So if you see a good deal for a flight, book it. It has absolutely nothing to do with what day it is. It's literally being updated constantly. This used to be where, people didn't have an opportunity. Like people got paid on Fridays and people were manually entering all of this. So on Tuesdays, there was a lull in that because they were resetting everything. that's no longer the case. So if you see a good deal, book it. General rule of thumb is if you are booking domestic travel, 2 to 3 months in advance, and if you are booking international travel, 6 months in advance is usually when you're going to get the best deals on flights. And then for hotels, they use a very similar algorithm. So if you see a good deal, go ahead and book it. You can look at historical data to see what they typically charge, to see if you're getting gouged or not. And typically the earlier you book, the more accommodations they're going to have, and you're going to get better deals. If you're going overseas for a long period of time, look at some other options. A lot of other countries aren't as high on Airbnb as we are. So you need to look to see what that country is high on. For example, in London, they don't like Airbnbs. You're not going to get a ton of really good deals. There's not going to be a lot of nice places. Hotels are going to be expensive, but they have this really amazing vehicle called an apart hotel. And it's basically a furnished apartment. And if you're staying for 7 days or longer, you get a discounted rate. So look for stuff like that in the destination that you're going to.
Cool. Definitely. And just go into our next topic. It's immersive experiences and activities. So really, like I was saying before, when I, travel to some of these countries, sometimes, I like to do like an all-inclusive if I want to just relax. But other times I don't like doing that. And I like just coming up with an itinerary on my own and allowing me to travel, say like into the little different towns and actually like immerse myself in their culture. I also find a lot of times that like the food that they have, in their own town and their homemade cooking is so much better. So actually when I went to Italy a few years ago and we were eating in the hotels, they try to Americanize the food and it was horrible. And I was just so upset. I was like, we're in Italy, we're supposed to be eating this amazing food, and everything we were eating, it was just so bad. But when we went outside and were on our own, we found like some of the most amazing restaurants. And actually when I was in Sorrento, I think I had probably the best pasta I've ever had in my life there. So,
Oh my God. Speaking of food, Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, speaking of food, remember that when you're reading reviews and when you're looking on TripAdvisor, et cetera, that most of the suggestions that are being made are going to be based off a very baseline palette. So the way that I equate that is like very bland, not much flavor, not much spice, because that's going to cater to the majority of people. So if you're like me and you want a little bit more like zoo in your food, you have to dig a little bit deeper and find influencers and find restaurants that are going to be off the beaten path so that you're not constantly disappointed by the food because they're catering to a palate that is less evolved than yours is. So that's something that I've had to learn the hard way. And if you're in touristy areas, you're more likely to run into what Michelle's talking about, where they're Americanizing the food. And that's not the experience of another culture that I want to have.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And one thing that I like to do too is when I get to say a country is just ask like a local, like what their favorite restaurant is, and try there. I'm sure they're not going to steer you wrong in that.
Absolutely, I do the same. So the next one that we're going to talk about is packing. And I know Michelle touched on this briefly a little bit earlier, but if you're going on a trip, especially that's more than 7 days and you're going to multiple destinations, it is of the utmost importance that you're planning your packing well in advance, and making sure you're getting the right luggage, making sure that you're taking advantage of packing cubes. They're everywhere. They're great. They vacuum seal your clothes so they take up less space. And then also, if you are going to a destination where you're going to be shopping, that you're leaving enough room in your suitcase for anything that you might want to bring back with you. And for me, I always try to bring, this is where I always come back to when I'm packing for trips, is classics. Don't bring a lot of trendy pieces with you. Bring a lot of pieces that can be versatile. Like bring a pair of pants that you can wear with a different shirt. Make sure that you're taking advantage of that because you're not going to have a ton of room in your suitcase. And I understand like we all want to be fashionable, but at the end of the day, if you're bringing a ton of like trendy options, you're not going to be able to repurpose any of those options, and you're going to have to bring twice the amount of clothing. So I have a Pinterest board going for London. We're going to be in some pretty extreme temperatures. We're going to Scotland as well. So I want to make sure that I have sweaters to layer, rain jackets, the right shoes. You can't bring a million pairs of shoes, and you need to bring shoes that are comfortable for walking. So honestly, for me, like with London, I've been looking at brands that are cultivated in London, like London Fog and Burberry, et cetera, like all the things that will have, clothing that's going to be equipped for the climate. And you look into the culture too. Like London is known for being pretty stylish. So you probably want to make sure that you're looking as nice as you can. In a lot of the areas, some of the restaurants are going to have requirements that you dress up and have dress codes. So doing all that research on the front end and making sure also from a safety perspective, you don't want to look like a tourist. Like you don't want to be wearing like windbreakers and Reeboks and fanny packs, right? So you've got to figure out you've got to figure out a way to, just from a safety perspective, to make sure that you're blending in.
Right. Yeah. And I'm so glad that you're more practical about packing. Even though I am super type A and like to organize and think I'm a good packer, I am the person at the airport with an overweight suitcase and trying to scramble before getting on my plane, like taking out like whatever I can to shove in like my boyfriend's like 40-pound suitcase where he has, ample room for me. And also, I have been doing this lately and it's so bad, but I've been waking up like super early before my trip to pack. I know it's so bad. So I'll be like, say if like I have like an 8 a.m. flight or something, I've been waking up at like 3 a.m. to pack. I don't know like what's gone in my head, but I just feel like if I don't do it the day of, I just feel like I'm going to forget something.
Oh my God. Okay. So Michelle cultivates the Pinterest boards before, but then day of is when she's packing.
Exactly. So I say to myself every trip, this time is going to be different. And I get my, suitcase out. Some stuff, I do pack, but then it gets to it or like the day before and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to wake up early. But to Jenny's point, I do have my, Pinterest board up to what outfits. I also sometimes like to take pictures of my outfits and just create an album. So that way, when I'm there, I know what I'm wearing and I don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. And then also what I'll do is just create like a note in your app or like a task in a Google sheet and just basically like list out items that you're going to need. And then once I put that in my suitcase, I just check it off. So I know I'm not forgetting anything.
And that's an amazing point that you guys should definitely abide by, especially if you're a woman. I know that we dress very much on feel, like how we're feeling and how our body's feeling that day. So it is imperative that you try your stuff on before you just throw it in the suitcase, because the last thing you want is taking up space for stuff that you're never going to feel comfortable wearing when you're there. Yeah. So great tip, Michelle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And then the next thing that we have here is addressing and overcoming potential challenges that are going to come most likely on your trip, especially if it's a longer trip, right? If you're in a non-English speaking country, there's going to be some opportunity for people to try to take advantage of you from a monetary perspective. You might have, different challenges that you never even thought you'd face. We went to Miami this year. We used a new app for a rental car. And it turned out that the guy who owned the car was like kind of a scam artist, and he had like gotten an offender bender the week before, and he tried to like pinpoint us for that. And then the car got towed away because he had all these parking tickets, and the company was essentially holding us accountable for it. And it's a newer, platform. So they didn't have any recourse. And I mean, like it was like $1,500 by the end of the day. So you just need to figure out that things like that are going to happen, and you can't let it ruin your trip, because then every dollar you spent on that trip becomes moot, right? So it's just planning for, and that's an extreme example, but there's going to be other examples where you pay for something and you're, not smitten with the experience. You have to have kind of like a sunk cost fund, and also a sunk experience fund, in my experience, because not everything is going to be, amazing, right? So learning how to prepare for that in every way that you can.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And another little tip, but I've just seen like in the news now, just so many flight delays and cancellations. So just take that in consideration. A lot of times I feel like if our flight's delayed or it gets canceled, it just makes us very upset. We're usually have a negative attitude about it. Just try to, I know it sucks, but just try to remain positive and just know, you're going on vacation. So it'll be fun in a few days.
Okay.
And
No, I was just going to say, I can't wait to get into the next part because I want to hear so much about your most cherished memories from your bucket list trips. But one thing that I wanted to piggyback off of what you're saying is making sure that you're being intentional and embracing the present and not future tripping. When you're on these trips, I am literally the worst offender when it comes to this because like I said before, scientifically, the anticipation of a trip is going to be more fulfilling than the actual experience of it. So one of the things that I have done to be more rooted in the present of what I'm doing is bringing a journal and writing down what is amazing about whatever it is that I'm experiencing in that moment and trying to do it. I mean, I don't force myself to do it every day, but I promise you, if you start journaling when you're on vacation and you're having one of those moments that feels like you're in a movie, write down that feeling, right? Like those are fleeting in our life. And it really allows you to be more rooted and look back on that trip with more fondness than you would have before.
Right. I love that. And another thing that I've tried to do, myself is just put down my phone, when I'm on a trip, just making sure that I'm really not like on social media, texting so much and just making sure like I'm living in the present and really taking in, what I am experiencing.
Yeah.
And what you're saying with the journaling, it kind of reminds me. So when I was younger, I used to scrapbook. So I remember after like every vacation I would print out my pictures and go to like Michael's or Joann's and get like little scrapbook stickers and make a scrapbook for every vacation. And just kind of like reminds me of your journaling.
I used
to love like looking back and being like, oh, I was probably like 9 or 10, but that was like my most favorite like memory of the day or where we went to eat, what we did every day. It's kind of the same thing. So it's like a little adult scrapbooking.
Oh my God, I love that. Okay, before we sign off, I'm going to ask Michelle, what is your most cherished memory from your greatest bucket list trip?
Okay. Yeah, so I probably have 2 of my greatest bucket list trips that I've taken thus far are to Barcelona and then Italy. So I think Barcelona is my all-time favorite trip I've ever went on. And we just immerse ourselves in the culture so much. And one of my favorite artists, Gaudi, he, originated from Barcelona. So we got to take a trip to, his museums. We went to see like his park. And then we actually took a day trip to Montserrat, if you've ever heard of it, but it's this little, city in Spain, and you actually have to take a rail car to get up to the city. And it was so funny. So it was like just going up like this like huge like rail car and just overseeing the mountains. And it is a very, religious town. So they just had like beautiful churches. There was hiking, but the views from it, were really amazing, and also the history behind it. So you learn so much just, traveling through the day. And we actually used, so one of the books that I like to use, or like websites, but Rick Steves does a really good itinerary planning. So if you don't have time to do it by yourself, if you want to pick up his book, he like does a deep dive into that country or city that you're traveling to. So he'll, break it down by different locations, what is a must see, even like by like the times that you should go to these attractions. And also he gives you a little history of the country, which I feel is, super important to read up on before you go.
I love that. I'm totally buying that book.
Yeah, no, it's so good. But what about you? What is your, most favorite bucket list trip?
Definitely. Yeah, well, that's probably going to be the one. But in the one that comes to my mind is definitely I went to Genoa or Camogli, both towns in Italy, for my really good friend's wedding in 2019. And it was just it was special for so many reasons. But kind of a little bit of a backstory. Right before I went on the trip, I lost my job, and it was one of those things where the employer, it just wasn't a good fit, and he didn't have integrity. So it was a good thing that we parted ways. But I'm someone who constantly wants to control everything. So going on a trip without a job to come back to normally would have really stressed me out. And I remember just being so engulfed in every single thing that I was doing. And it's like that the city and the town like has to spell on me, where I was able to be like fully present. And I think it's because I had a short amount of time there, and a lot of the activities that we were doing were planned by somebody else. And I was able to just kind of go and be, and it was so beautiful, so much culture. We were with locals because my girlfriend was marrying somebody from there, and they were really just showing off for us, like their little town and how amazing it was. And we ate amazing food, had amazing conversations, drank a ton of wine. And it just was like definitely the trip of a lifetime.
I love that. So I have to put it on my list for my future bucket list trips.
Absolutely.
Next time I go to Italy, I have to visit it.
I love it. Well, definitely theme here, you guys, Italy. Yes. So basically the main takeaway when you're going on a trip is you really can't control everything. Sometimes it's not going to go according to plan. And really, guys, like that's okay, right? Like that's part of life. It's beautiful. Exactly. The only constant is change, right? So just make sure you're doing what you can to try to make this the best opportunity as you possibly can. But enjoy the journey, embrace it, and use these tools to help you make sure that you're maximizing on your vacation.
Definitely. And when we post our recap, just write in the comments maybe your favorite bucket list trip that you've taken so far, or for somewhere you're really excited to travel to.
Yeah, we would love to hear from you guys so that we can definitely steal all of your ideas. I'm just kidding. If you guys have the opportunity to, definitely, not next week, but the week after, we're having a guest speaker. He's going to be chatting with us about how to negotiate top dollar for your salary if you're looking for a raise. He is my mentor. He helped me do that countless times. So lots of tools in his tool belt, and I highly recommend that if that's a challenge that you're currently facing in your career.
Yeah, definitely tune in for that one. It's going to be a good one.
Absolutely. We hope you guys have an amazing rest of your Wine Wednesday.
We'll see y'all next week. Bye.